Good evening. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. I'll be tonight's host. With us tonight we have Daniel W. O'Grady. Dan O'Grady, if you will. Dan O'Grady is currently the probate judge in Bethel. Now, what the state's done to save some money, and I was hearing about this from Dan a couple, 3 years ago, started to discuss the possibility of Connecticut consolidating probate judges from having one in each of the 169 towns down into regional probate judges. And lo and behold, to save money, we've done that now. So we've got Dan and a number of other candidates running for a probate judgeship which covers Newtown, Bethel, Reading, and Ridgefield, as opposed to just Bethel. The big question is, what exactly is the function of a probate judge, Dan?
Well, first of all, Dave, thank you for inviting me onto the show. I'm
Our
happy
pleasure.
to be here. Well, the probate system and the probate judges have been in existence for 300 years in Connecticut. And as you pointed out, most of the towns had their own probate judge until recently. Primarily, we handle the estates of people that have passed away. That's our primary function. But there's a number of other things that we do that are very important. For instance, mentally challenged persons come under our jurisdiction. Sometimes there's an elderly person that's suffering from Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, and they need somebody to be appointed to take care of their affairs. There's mentally retarded adults, and when they turn 18, their parents are automatically released as guardians. And we have to appoint someone to make sure that they're kept in a safe environment. We do adoptions, we do custody matters, we terminate parental rights, we change names. There's a number of things that we do that the public is not aware of, primarily because most of these records are kept confidential and there's very little press concerning the events that have unfolded.
It's one of those lesser known positions then. Now, how long have you been probate judge in Bethel?
This year will be my 20th year.
Has it been that long? I remember, and this is the sidelight, that I remember that when Dan became probate judge, he became probate judge by going door to door. Back before going door to door was a popular thing to do. He got out there, he met people, he answered their questions, he proved to the public that he had the skills that it would take to be a good probate judge, and he unseated another probate judge, the current one at the time. And here you go, 20 years later, you're still doing it, and as I understand from myself being in Bethel all these years for the most part, doing a very admirable job.
Well, thank you, Dave. That advice I received actually came from Jody Rell when she was our state rep in the 107th District. I asked her what was the most effective thing that I could do, and she said, Dan, it doesn't cost anything but time and effort. Go out and meet the voters. And that has turned out to be a very successful formula.
Sure, yeah.
Year after year.
It's what primes campaigns now. And I mean, I ran for the 107th 2 years ago, the Democratic ticket, and that was when everybody started going out and going door to door and meeting people and answering questions and letting voters get to know you and get to know what your positions were on issues, get to know what you felt were the important aspects of whatever elected official you wanted to become or office you wanted to keep. So let's go back to what exactly goes into wills and estates and things of that nature, that aspect of the probate judge.
Well, if a resident in town or an out-of-town resident passes away, and they have property located in the town of Bethel, a probate procedure needs to take place. Now, there's several different types of procedures, starting from very simple to very complex. But generally speaking, a family representative or an attorney comes into the probate court, files an application, which says, we would like to have this estate administered. Now, sometimes people have wills and sometimes they don't. But the vast majority of them do.
I'm presuming that having a will is probably far preferable to not having a will for those people watching that do or do not have wills.
Well, if you pass away and you do not have a will, the state of Connecticut imposes one on you. Basically, your estate is divided along certain statutory paths. Some might go to your spouse, some might go to your children. If you've remarried and you've got stepchildren, you've got your children from your first marriage, you've got your stepwife, things can get a little bit complicated, and feelings can certainly be hurt.
I was going to say that's probably the biggest issue that probably comes up before you, is when somebody comes in and says, hey, I don't like the will. I don't think the will says what it should have said. I don't think it reflects the actual intent of my mom, dad, uncle, grandfather, whomever passed away. It seems like you probably would have people that do come in and occasionally challenge the how do you know that the will that a person has filled out is valid?
Well, there's certain minimum requirements, Dave. It has to be in writing, and it needs to have 2 witnesses, and it needs to be notarized. Those are the minimum requirements in Connecticut. But we recognize wills that have been signed in foreign jurisdictions, meaning something from the United Kingdom or Canada or Florida or California, is acceptable in Connecticut to probate. So I have had several trials involving forged wills, stolen wills, wills that couldn't be found, only a copy could be found.
So the original is kind of important then?
It's very important. You have to show why the original is not available, because there's a presumption that it was destroyed. Destroyed because you changed your mind.
Has anyone ever done, in the age of video, has anyone ever done a video will? And if so, what's the validity of it if they've done one?
Okay, well, a will needs to be in writing, so a video will doesn't do anything. However, they're used as a supplement.
Okay.
An attorney will have somebody execute the will, and they'll videotape it. And then the person who executed the will is shown answering questions to show that they're competent, that they understand, that they are not being coerced or forced into doing something that they don't want to do, and that they were alive and well, and that these are the real witnesses who actually saw the signing. And sometimes the decedent will add something. Like, I have specifically not left anything to a particular relative for a specific reason, or if they want to be polite, for reasons that you certainly know but I care not to repeat.
Ah, okay. So it really, in fact, just adds another dimension to the legal aspect of the written will.
It certainly helps support that being what the decedent's wishes were. And the decedent's wishes is what is important. If you don't write a will, your property might go someplace that you had not intended. Perhaps you belonged to a church and you wanted to leave something. Perhaps it was a charity that had helped you or helped a close relative sometime in your life, and you wanted to leave that charity somebody. Or maybe something to the Danbury Hospital. Unless you have a will which spells this out, those wishes will not be carried out.
Does everything automatically go to a spouse, or does a certain portion of, if there's no will?
Well, there's statutes which indicate how much goes to a spouse if she's the only survivor, how much goes to the spouse and your children from that spouse. Then there's another formula for your spouse, current spouse, and children not born of your current spouse. So in other words, you might have children from a first marriage and then have a second wife. And maybe you have children with two different women. So there's different formulas that are used to figure out what the amount of inheritance will be to these different classes of persons.
So it's kind of a usual and customary kind of thing based on literally 300 years of experience for the probate court in general.
Yes, the statutes haven't really changed concerning that, and have not really changed at all.
What have you seen in terms of unusual wills? You mentioned something about leaving money to, you could leave money to a hospital, you could leave money, I've heard of people leaving money to pets, which I guess has to be handled, has to be administered by someone other than the pet. But what, have you seen in your 20 years anything that stands out as being really out of the ordinary?
Well, one of the cases I had involved a stolen Stradivarius violin.
Oh.
In that case, I decided it went up on appeal.
Yeah.
It was upheld on appeal, and then it was appealed to the Connecticut Supreme Court, where they further upheld my decision.
Yeah.
There was a resident in town who was in possession of this stolen Stradivarius. It was stolen in 1939 from Carnegie Hall. I'm sorry, 1936. It was stolen during a concert by a famous Polish conductor who left the violin in his dressing room. So somehow this Bethel resident wound up with this violin.
Either by taking it or buying it from somebody else who took it, or buying it from somebody who bought it from somebody who took it, and there was some chain of custody there, obviously.
Well, there was a lot of testimony that we couldn't substantiate, that perhaps he was the thief himself, or whether he had bought it hot. But he was living in New York as a musician at that time near Carnegie Hall. Okay, so there was you know, there were a lot of potential explanations that made some semblance of sense. So what happened was his ex-wife was named the executor in his will, and she did not want to put the Stradivarius violin into the estate, but rather she went to Lloyd's of London, who had paid off an insurance claim, and offered to return this property to Lloyd's, because Lloyd's would have owned it at that point because they made the insurance claim. Yeah. But she would only return it if they gave her a substantial sum of money. So that's what the issue was the finder's fee of $300,000, 10% of the value of the violin. I was going to say that again? I can't read that. I see research. Okay. So presumably the violin was worth $3 million. $3 million. It was appraised. Yeah. And she wanted a 10% finder's fee for returning something that she knew was stolen by someone, possibly someone close to her. Well, her theory was a thief cannot benefit from their crime, so the finder's fee should not go into his estate and should not go to his daughter, but rather me, the ex-wife, I should keep the money. Oh, okay. Well, I guess there's some logic to that, and at least there was to her, I guess. So now, how did it turn out? How did you adjudicate it, and as you say, it was upheld through the upper courts? It came down to my finding that the violin belonged to the decedent. We did not really know how he acquired it, whether it was stolen or given to him or sold to him, but it was in his possession. So it did belong with the estate then? That's correct. Okay, and then it was, how was it divided, how was it figured into the estate? Did it go on the auction block, and then money given to the estate, which was then divided equally amongst? I ordered that the finder's fee be paid into the estate. Okay, the finder's fee. Okay. Yes. Okay, so they didn't get the full benefit of the $3 million as the estate? No. Okay. That seems pretty reasonable. Now, we talked about the campaigning. You've got a really big swatch of real estate, really big
wide area that you cover now. Newtown, Bethel, Reading, and Ridgefield. A lot of people, and a lot of that area is very rural. How do you reach out to people in that wide a location? Do you concentrate on the closer areas, and how do you do it?
Well, do you mean how does somebody attempt to campaign in that area?
Yeah. How do you go out and now? Obviously, in Bethel, everyone knows you, but you've got these 3 other towns now that may not know you as well as the people in the town of Bethel.
Okay. Well, there's certain components that go to this. I was taught many years ago that you should try to have 7 voter contacts during an election. Because after 7 contacts, they should be able to remember your name. So whether it's newspaper stories or advertisements or signs or knocking on the door, 7 contacts.
That's pretty much a standard figure. The same way that you have the idea of getting your message across, it was 27 words, 7 seconds, 3 ideas, which is pretty standard.
Precisely. Now, the 4 towns have 16,000 Republicans. That's probably 10,000 to 12,000 houses.
Yep.
So between the day of the convention, which was early May and August, it's not possible to go visit 10,000, 12,000 houses.
No.
So you try to be as efficient as possible by moving as quickly as you can and hitting dense areas. That's about the best one can hope for.
Well, that's in a way, I think that's kind of good. And I did the same thing when I ran 2 years ago. You kind of go to the areas that are more dense, condominiums, for example. And the reason why you go, when you go there, you're not reaching out to the wealthiest of your constituents. You're reaching out actually to the less wealthy of your constituents, ones that probably need your assistance more. Possibly more than the wealthiest. I mean, they need guidance. Yeah,
perhaps.
So that's kind of good, I think, in a way that that the people get heard by the candidates, the people that need to be heard more by the candidates, and address their concerns to the candidates than the ones that may not need it as much. I have a question here from the studio to talk about genealogy research. Talk about that generically.
Well, quite often people will come into the probate court and ask to see the probate records on a particular family name. So our records are kept alphabetical as well as by year.
Yeah.
And so you can go to a index and look up that particular name. Now, if you go into the probate records concerning that name, you'll find different things. You'll find that when the person passed away, here's their will. Here's the people named in the will. Here's the relatives that received notice. They may not have been in the will, but these were their other blood relatives that would have inherited had there not been a will. You'll also find...
so you can make a tangible comparison to what would happen in testate or intestate.
Right, intestate, they will show the closest blood relatives. So that would help you in your family search. It would also list what properties were owned, the addresses of these properties, the value. In some of the old records, you'll find that somebody owned, several acres of land, plus a wagon and 2 cows and some other things. So you can get a pretty good picture of what the town of Bethel was like and what its residents were like and the amount of wealth that they may have had at that time.
Interesting, yeah. That seems like a very good way to find out, not just to say the town in general, the overview of the town through the centuries, but also specific families. Because I'm presuming you maintain these records on file ad infinitum, so that people can go back and find out who their great-grandfather left his estate to, how he divided it up.
Okay, now with technological advances, I'm happy to say that most of these files have already been microfiched, and that process will continue. And the records are going to be sent up to the State Library in Hartford and kept there in storage. But everything will be online, so you can come down to the Bethel Probate Court or another probate court and go on to their computer system and do this research, rather than the old way of opening a book, writing down volume and page, and then going and finding the records and reading them. This way, they'll come right up with a couple of touches of your fingers.
Is it possible to do it online other than coming down to the town hall of the given town that you're in?
Not just yet, but I think that will be coming, because the town clerk records now, if you want to know what deed was filed and what real estate transaction took place, you want to know what your tax bill is and when the last time it was paid, you want to know your assessment. I believe once security is straightened out, you'll be able to access these probate records.
Interesting. Again, with the genealogy research, what kind of questions, any unusual questions that people want to find out? What have you seen over the years that people, questions that might have seemed a little out of the ordinary?
Well, sometimes deaths occur and people don't know it.
Okay. Huh.
And or they were told a family story that, Uncle Charlie owned a farm in Bethel, and you're going to inherit part of it upon your father's death. It's something you had heard all the time, but was never followed up on. So people will come in, gee, do you have a file on this particular decedent, and may I see it? Because there's something I should have gotten, and I want to know why I hadn't. Most times they find it was sold prior to the person's death.
Okay.
But, there are people who are looking for inheritance. There's also people who come in to find estates that have been opened but never finalized. And so there's assets that might be in there, and then you'll get a letter from one of these persons that says, attention, we have found an inheritance that belongs to you, and if you promise to give us 10, 20, 30% of it, we'll tell you where it is and how to get it. So we have people like that come in.
Oh, interesting. Because I see things on the paper periodically where there's a reach out from, I guess, where the things go that into that fund that's created.
Yeah, the word they use is escheat, where the state of Connecticut will become the sole owner of this property unless someone comes forward and claims it.
Is there a statutory limitation on how soon people have to come forward? Or
I believe there is, and that's why they publish in the newspaper, because that starts the time running.
Okay.
And if no one shows up to make the claim, then the state keeps the property.
Interesting. And then they auction it?
Well, if it's cash, they keep it. If it's something else, they'll sell it.
Okay. Okay.
But stock is something that, what I mean is certificates of shares in companies, that's something that sometimes is out there and there's nobody claiming ownership of it.
What happens if something changes in value appreciably between the time that the person dies and the time it's probated? At what point do you make the decision that the stock needs to be sold and the value may have changed over that period of time? Does this ever come into play?
Well, it comes more into play when the estate has been opened and no one is taking any action. And beneficiaries starting to call and say, gee, I haven't received anything. It's been a year since my father died. What's going on? And so then we have to put pressure on the administrator, executor to perform their duties and either sell these things or give them to these parties and let them sell them.
How does a person become an executor of an estate?
Well, the decedent, when they wrote their will, they're asked, who do you want to carry out your final wishes and administer your estate?
So a person that presumably is the one that the decedent sees as being the most trustworthy to handle.
That's correct.
The things the way they would have wanted them handled had they been there.
That's right.
We're closing up now, and I want to know if there's anything else you want to bring out about the upcoming election. What makes you the best qualified candidate? Because there are other candidates out there that have had that position for a period of time in other towns that are running for likewise for the office. What makes you the best qualified candidate for the office?
Well, I think the experience that I've had of 20 years of judging and the thousands of cases that I've handled, the knowledge I've brought to the job and have picked up, and the dedication. I mean, I'm very dedicated to the job, and I try to make a difference and do the right thing for the people that need the help of the probate court. I'd like to continue that not only in Bethel, but this new region, which is Newtown, Bethel, Reading, and Richfield, where we're going to go from serving 18,000 people to 80,000 people. Wow. And the court will be located in Bethel, the court that I helped design and I've worked in since 1994. And I hope to be the new regional judge for quite some time to come.
Excellent. Well, you've got a good track record, and here's to the future. Thank you very much for joining us, Dan.
Thank you, David.
And this has been Progressive Soup. I'm David Stevenson. Judge Daniel W. O'Grady, probate judge in Bethel, and looking to become probate judge for the region that encompasses Newtown, Bethel, Reading, and Richfield. Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening.